This is a Culture Inject production.
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and today I am joined by our new co-host, Quentin Harris. On today's episode, we're going to focus on giving you a glimpse of Quentin before our fourth season officially starts next week. This is your chance to become better acquainted with our new co-host. So, welcome to the Part of Us family, Quentin.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So basically, I am probably one of the biggest music nerds in the world. And I've been fortunate enough that separate from my day job in accounting and finance, I have a parallel career as a professional music critic and author. And I've been doing that now since the fall of 2006. I started my career at the Dayton City paper, which is now defunct, but it's back in my hometown of Dayton, Ohio, where I'm from. And that would later spin me off into lots of other different writing endeavors, from sleeve notes for reissued albums. I had my own website for a while, and then I've written for several online and physical publications before landing recently at Albumism, is where I've done the bulk of my work of late. And then I've also have my own book line, the Record Redux series, which focuses on different women in popular music. So, and I had briefly had a podcast with a colleague of mine, Jerome Graham, called Music Out of Bounds. And I just love music, and always my happy place is being in a record store, basically.
Okay, so you've had your own podcast. What made you want to join Part of Us?
Well,
were you a listener?
Yes. I'm actually a fan of Part of Us. One of my favorite things to do when I'm not listening to music at work is I tend to listen to the news. I'm a huge NPR geek. I've had the good fortune to be on the Atlanta arm of NPR, WABE, on a few times promoting some of my work. But your podcast was one of the ones I would listen to, and you guys have had some great episodes. I believe you had a really fantastic episode with the Rona Bennett, which is fantastic, and a few other ones I've listened to over the current lifespan of the podcast that have been interesting. It's fun, it's substantive, and it's informative, and I love that.
Yes, we're trying to get more of the EV girls in, so if you ladies are listening, don't be afraid. We're friendly. So, what's your favorite genre? I know we were talking earlier. You love the girl groups. You love, Sister Sledge and Mandy Moore. What are some of your favorite genres and artists and albums? If you could pick, if someone wanted to get to know Quentin and they said, what are the 5 defining artists or albums that will help someone get to know who you are? What would they be?
Well, my 5, I believe it or not, actually have I know what my favorite 200 albums are. And I have the first 100 ranked.
You said 200?
Oh, yes.
Oh, my God.
And this comes from an activity that we did when I joined Albumism, where our editor had us actually name the first 5, our favorite 5 albums of all time, and then 10, and then 20. So I've got those ranked as well. And the first 100 of the 200 are ranked. But to answer your question, to put a finer point on it, my top 5 favorite albums of all time, in no order, but these are the top 5, would include Donna Summer's The Wanderer, Human Being by Seal, Parade by Prince, Kylie Minogue's self-titled 5th album from 1994, which fans affectionately call KM94, which is short for Kylie Minogue because it was issued in 94, and of course Spice World by the Spice Girls. So I am a pop genre person in the sense that I love everything. I'm into prog, I'm into jazz, I'm into disco, punk, power pop, hip hop, electronic, alternative. I love it all, but I approach it from the pop genre perspective, in that I never want to be tied down. I love to sort of move around and be amorphous in that way. So technically the pop genre is my favorite, but I love something from everything. I'm always moving around. A record that's currently driving me crazy in a good way is Corinne Bailey Rae's new album, Black Rainbows. Phenomenal record. To pick it up if you haven't heard it. And I've also been into a singer-songwriter who started off in Christian rock and it would transition more into secular music. Her name is Sam Phillips, and she's just been mind blowing. It's blowing me away.
I feel like every time I talk to you, you're giving me something. I'm like, okay, I gotta go look into that.
It's the music nerd thing. I'm sorry in advance.
So, like, how does In Vogue fit into your taste, your musical? What's the word? Your musical cineplex. Like where does In Vogue fit in?
They're pretty seminal. I mean, I'm 38, so I grew up with In Vogue at the height of their success. I was in my single digits. So I think I was about probably 6 when I remember hearing Hold On in the back of my parents' Buick Riviera. I think it's a Riviera, Cadillac Riviera, one of those cars that were big and, luxurious or whatever they were. What I call them, the black land yacht cars. And it left a huge impression on me. I always associate Hold On with Nighttime, but I came up with them during that time. And then obviously I traced them up through to EV3 when they were still active in terms of being a commercial entity. I didn't actually start buying their records though until I was about 21. So I was in college at this time. And as I had done, in my teen years, when I started buying records, specifically, really seriously at 16, I was like, I love In Vogue, and I knew that they were still active. I said, let me go back and start buying their records. And in 2006, and it was love at first listen in terms of hearing the albums themselves, separate from just the hit singles. They make great records. I think that they are fantastic interpreters. I think they're also good songwriters. I don't think they get their due for that. And I think they've been fortunate to have sympathetic collaborators in Foster and McElroy. But I also really love what they've done with branching out with other producers, most recently on Electric Cafe to a certain degree. And then obviously most notably on EV3, which is my favorite In Vogue album.
And we're going to talk about EV3 later. We have some very differing opinions on EV3. Yes. But since we're like in the same age group, so were you a part of like all of the different fan wars and like who's your favorite member and all of that? I don't really try to get tied up in that. I have my own perspectives, which I can be passionate about, and I try to express in a respectful way. But I feel that all of the members of In Vogue have contributed to the lore and the legacy. And, I like the classic lineup. I love the first trio iteration with Maxine and Terry and Cindy. And then probably my favorite lineup is Cindy, Terry, and Rona. Probably the only one that really didn't move me was when Amanda was with the group for the Christmas record. But I think had they not done that record, they wouldn't have been able to have done Soulflower. So I think it all has its place. So what you're saying is you were not one of the people on the EV Craze Yahoo group back in the day?
No.
Arguing back and forth?
I did not. No, I didn't do that. I tried to, I guess they would call that standing or Sand Wars now, but I know because when I got into them in 2006, and actually what was funny was, or excuse me, let me amend that previous statement, 2007, excuse me. I was writing for the paper, the Dayton City paper that I mentioned, and I did a piece on In Vogue. And I actually got to use that photo of them when it was briefly thought that Maxine was going to rejoin them. So it was Maxine, Rona, Cindy, and Terry. And I got to kind of do it. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and I did a deep dive into their entire catalog for the paper in 2007. It was very exciting. I gotcha. And I had my editor, Russell Florence Jr., was Black and gay, and was very instrumental in allowing me a certain level of, I had a lot of latitude. I had freedom to pursue most of the topics I wanted to write about. And so, In Vogue were not active, quote unquote, in that same way by that point. I think that was officially the 10th anniversary of EV3. But he liked the way I approached the story of just about them being just a sort of an underappreciated girl group who had more to offer than just the hits. And that's the way I've always approached them. I think it's okay to have your favorite. Cindy's probably my favorite. I'm probably jumping the gun here, but and I've had the good fortune of interviewing her twice and Terry once for Albumism in 2017 and 2020 respectively. So I just think all the ladies are great. And in my dream, in my heart of hearts, I'd love for them to do a new edition, sort of home again reunion where it's the classic four with Rona, because I think Rona has earned her stripes and her spurs.
Traditionally, I've been against that, but at this point, I'll take anything.
You're funny. You're absolutely hilarious.
I actually really like Rona. I like her. I think she's very talented. And she's very nice. She's very sweet.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, they've had, 2 chances to make it work with the Classic Four lineup. So at this point, I think that ship has sailed. And quite frankly, I'd love to see them all together, but I'm happy with the group and the configuration it's been in, because they're still remitting music that's interesting to me. And unfortunately, I think Dawn and Maxine, specifically Dawn, have their own view of events, past and present, which they're entitled to, but I think they've allowed that to stop them from pursuing more creative pursuits that would be more engaging, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like never let anything come between you and the bag, you know what I mean? Like,
or even just being able to be creatively centered. As a Spice Girls fan, I've seen my group go through a few interesting configuration changes through the years. Not too many, but
they know how to get together when it's time to do that little tour.
Well, you never know. That's not always the case, and that's the thing, because it might seem.
I mean, Victoria doesn't seem to care, right? Because she doesn't really have to.
Well, no, I don't think it's an issue of have to. I just think Victoria's in a different place. I mean, keep in mind for that last tour, she still has to sign off on everything, primarily because all of the girls were songwriters, and they had a certain level of autonomy and agency. So there's nothing that they could have moved forward on without her consent. But interestingly enough, when they did that 4-piece tour with Jerry in 2019, it was actually the 20th anniversary of Christmas in Spice World, which was a series of dates, UK dates like that, not Return of the Spice Girls, that was the first reunion. The Spice World 2019 tour, it was their first set of dates solely as a 4-piece. They did them around Christmas time in 1999, and that was where they actually premiered some of the work that they were doing on their then unreleased, it hadn't come out yet, their third album. Because when they started the world tour the previous year in 1998, Jerry was still with the group. She left on the penultimate date of that European leg. So when they came to the States to tour it, they had to do it as a 4-piece. And then they came back after they finished America, did the 4 dates at Wembley, and then took a bit of a break. And then they reunited for those dates in 1999. So it was a 20-year gap. And at that time, Victoria was with them. So it was interesting seeing how Victoria was with them and Jerry was gone, but then Jerry was gone and Victoria was missing. And you do feel the absence of the member, because the harmonic structure does shift. But there are pros and cons to that, from that aspect as well as others, but it just builds a greater lore.
So when you see the ladies of In Vogue now, like, what do you feel is missing now when you see the current lineup? Well,
I mean, I think it was at one point it was the classic 4-part harmony, but they've been a trio longer than they've been a quartet. And so now for me, at least especially since I've been actively listening, not saying I wasn't listening as a kid, because that was when I was engaging with them, was when they were at the peak of their success and visibility. But when I started buying their music as an adult, they were a 3-piece. And I feel like that music, to me, I'm used to hearing them in that configuration now. So and like the Spice Girls, when Jerry first left, in the way they had to reconfigure as a 4-piece, and out of, obviously they had to, because they were still going, they had 3 years left actively before they went on hiatus. I think In Vogue had to restructure. And I think that worked out for them. I mean, I think there are always going to be people who only want the group in that configuration of Dawn, Maxine, Cindy, and Terry. But I like what they've done when it was Maxine, Cindy, and Terry. I like what they've done when it was Cindy, Terry, and Rona. And I think In Vogue was one of those great groups that all of the women, and they're actually very similar to the 70s Supremes in this way, who's another group that I love, because Mary Wilson was sort of the stalwart member, but there were different women who came into the group at different intervals during the 70s in those 6 years.
The other co-hosts, I've talked about the Supremes and how much I loved Gene Terrell's version of the Supremes, but none of the other co-hosts really, they don't get it. So who is your favorite, post Diana?
Gene Terrell. Gene Terrell is it. It's a twofold answer. Because I mean, to be quite frank, I mean, the best version for me will always be Cindy, Mary, and Gene. My favorite Supremes album is the Touch album.
I agree.
Now, but however,
no, wait. Is that my favorite? No, my favorite is the first one they did.
Right On.
Up the Ladder to the...
Right
yes,
On.
I love that.
Right On.
But I like Touch too.
Well, Right On has my favorite Supreme song ever, which is But I Love You More.
Yes.
Which is beautiful. It's beautiful. Now, but I will say Touch is my favorite album. That was the first record that the Rolling Stone reviewed for the Supremes. And that had their hit Nathan Jones, which went on to be covered by Bananarama in 88. And I love Bananarama, but I wasn't too fond of that cover. Not because they couldn't do it, because the unison singing was a technique that they continued to do. That was what they kind of, Bananarama were known for. But the production wasn't really where it needs to be for that. Because Frank Wilson, may he rest in peace, put his foot in that track. But I love the Sherry, Cindy, and Mary configuration with Supreme 75, their first disco record, which had He's My Man. And that's got some great, like that. A lot of fans say technically, from a technical standpoint, that was the best technical pairing since Flo, Mary, and Diana.
He's My Man is so irritating to me. That song is so irritating. He's My Man.
It's fun. I mean, it was a transitional record because they had to come out of the, from the previous the Jimmy Webb album. But there's a lot of great stuff on that record. And of course, that led to High Energy, which is when they brought in Suzette. When Cindy stepped back, and that High Energy is actually a phenomenal. It's actually one of my favorite disco records of that period. It's a great album, but I like a lot on Supreme 75, like Bend a Little, which was an outtake that was put on their 70s Supremes anthology. Is phenomenal. The rhythm section that's just cooking. Oh, it's fantastic. And just that that blend is just chef's kiss. It's beautiful. So, but I could go on and on, but that's to return to In Vogue. I don't, at this point, I don't feel that anything's really missing. If we were to get something extra, if we were able to get Maxine and Dawn back, great. But I'm happy with Cindy and Terry and Rona.
I don't know. For me, when it's just, I guess because I'm so used to them as a quartet, in terms of like what I listen to, you know what I mean? Like the In Vogue that I listen to would definitely be them as a quartet more so than any version of them as a trio. So for me, just vocally, when I listen to like Electric Cafe or Soulflower, it's just like I just feel like I'm missing something just vocally, just in terms of like the sound of In Vogue that I like. But at any rate, so you said you've interviewed Cindy and Terry. Was that in person?
By phone. In the recording.
So have you ever met anyone in person from In Vogue?
No, I have not had the honor and the privilege. Maybe one day, but I would love to. Both of the interviews I did Cindy alone. It was a tie-in for the Funky Divas anniversary at the time in 2017. And then I got to interview them again in 2020 for the Born to Sing anniversary. I didn't do that piece. A colleague of mine named Matthew Hochter wrote the piece for Albumism because I did the Funky Divas retrospective, but I did do the Masterpiece Theater retrospective in 2020. And I got to ask and slide a few questions in about that. And that was a lot of fun.
So there's always the battle of what's the favorite In Vogue album, right? As I know you said EV3 is your favorite one, right? Favorite In Vogue song?
Oh, now this is kind of hard because I've never actually sat down to actually rank them. Like I always feel like with these exercises, you should sit down and actually think about it, and write them by hand. And I'm going through not just the singles but the deep cuts. And then, of course, there's different leads. And that's what I was listening. And there's different leads. So, goodness.
Because for me, I'll tell you mine. Right now, normally it fluctuates. But right now, I guess I'm in the mood of Runaway Love. Like, that song just really hits the spot for me right now.
So, my favorite deep cut is probably Losing My Mind. Because I feel like that's such a strong statement. I love the way Cindy and Terry are confident enough in themselves to step back and to let Rona sort of announce herself, but she fits so well into their sound and are giving those really great harmonies, and the sample that they used for that escapes me. But Rona is just so fantastic on that song. It's just one of my favorites. And then it's probably going to be another good deep cut, and probably Love Makes You Do Things from EV3. I really, really love that song. I think it's just pretty. And I just like the kind of the breezy sort of neo soul kind of blows a kiss, like the emotions a bit. And now if I had to pick like my main, like a hit single, it's probably a toss up between Hold On and Free Your Mind, both of which were just groundbreaking pieces of music. And to have experienced that in real time as a kid, like on the radio, like hearing those on the radio, there was nothing really like it. But so yeah, I know I kind of cheated there by naming 2 singles and then 2 deep cuts, but hey.
That's not a bad list. I mean, Losing My Mind is, I think, out of all of like the current lineups records, well, between Soulflower and Electric Cafe, Losing My Mind is definitely my favorite one, I think.
There's one on Electric Cafe I like.
Rona really sounds like Whitney a little bit to me on that song. Like she has like some Whitneyism somewhere in there.
I enjoy Whitney. I'm slightly above casual, but I'm not like a fanatic. Unfortunately, Whitney didn't really have the best albums. She was a singles act to me. But that's a separate conversation.
I feel that way with the exception of My Love Is Your Love. I think that's the only album that I think was like really, really good.
Really? I felt like that was the first Whitney album I bought 15 years ago, and I found it incredibly disappointing. Because when you compare that to what her peers were doing, we're talking Share My World by Miss Mary J. Blige, The Velvet Rope by Janet Jackson, even her mentees, people who were her followers, Brandy's Never Say Never. She wasn't, and of course Mariah Carey's Butterfly. She wasn't a patch on any of those. It was a commercial. It was a commercial success.
See,
but
I you know what's so funny?
It was a creative success, not in the. It wasn't anywhere comparable to any of those records. Like with Janet's The Velvet Rope, like she responded to the neo soul movement with The Velvet Rope. Whitney, to me, I remember like the title song was so exciting because it was so fresh and so different. Then you get to the record and it's just sort of boilerplate. She didn't really sort of drill down on that aesthetic, nor does she commit to the more obvious commercial trend stuff. So she tries to have her cake and eat it too. But before I lose my train of thought, I will say that I love Reach For Me from Electric Cafe. It's fantastic. And that was done with Dwayne Abernathy, who Dim Joints, who did some stuff with Janet on the Unbreakable album. So,
you know, I thought we were finally having common ground when talking about the Supremes, but
I still love Whitney. I just don't. But I don't dispute her talent as a singer. But I don't think that she was a singles artist. I think probably.
Okay, yeah. So no, what's so interesting though, because we had a conversation previously about EV3, which everyone will hear. But you know, I had a lot of thoughts after that conversation, and I was just thinking about, in my mind, where In Vogue went wrong with EV3 was I felt like they weren't progressive in the way like A Velvet Rope, A Share My World, and In My Love Is Your Love was. And then you just said you feel like My Love Is Your Love.
You can't put that. That can't be melted and poured on EV3.
I feel like In Vogue. I feel like Whitney with that album. It was very much so like. I think she had to find balance because she's known for like 80s ballads and the big stuff. So she had to have that in there. But then I think adding Dark Child in the mix with those records, it was, I think...
But that puts her on trend. That's not progressive. Or progressive past...
Well, you got to think at 97, like... Our Dark Child had worked with Brandy and Mary J. Blige, but so I mean that was like that was still like the beginning of Dark Child's run. It wasn't like it was like 99, 2000 when everybody had a Dark Child track. You know what I'm saying? It's progressive with being on trend. It's not. It wasn't. There's not a single track on that album that approaches the complexity of whatever. And this is Babyface at his peak. Not even close to me. The problem that I have with that record, with the Whitney record, and where I would separate it from the In Vogue record is that, and where Mariah was successful with Butterfly, is that
And so I'll put In Vogue to one side and return to them with EV3. But Butterfly, to me, was a record that managed to be on trend in certain areas, but it was also progressive in what it was doing with Mariah sound and helping her to grow, and she took risks that very much did alienate her from a considerable portion of her white base. That record literally cut her diamond sales in half. The 5 million white people who added up to the 5 million black people that drove the 10 million sales of Daydream were cut down the middle with 5 million. So I'd say probably 3 million black folks bought that record, 2 million white folks bought it, because she drilled down and redefined that contemporary black aesthetic in her own voice, creative voice, I'm saying, not literal voice. As it relates to EV3, now this is where I always say it's important to have what I call well-rounded subjective perspective and objective fact. Now, the objective fact is that In Vogue took several risks with that record, primarily branching out from their main clique of producers, Foster and McElroy, and worked with some other people, Organized Noise, Babyface, Diane Warren, did all of that work. That falls in between both poles. To a certain degree it didn't, because it only shifted 1 million copies, and it only went platinum, and it only produced like a top 10 and a top 20 hit, separate from the Set It Off soundtrack song Don't Let Go Love, which was put into the album. But a well-rounded subjective perspective will lead you to say that if you are open to seeing what they were trying to do, I think the record was very much successful. Was it a little bit transitional? Yeah, because there was a lot of other internal and external pressures that were coming at them as they were making that record, least of all the Self of Dawn. But out of that, I still think they plucked a pretty interesting record. And it's one of my favorite like curveballs of that decade in the R&B space, because they did take some risks, and they did, in my opinion, come up mostly smelling like roses. Some sequencing issues aside, toss off a track or two, I think it's a pretty good album. And I will say the reason I pick it as my favorite is because it took me years to figure out what that was. For a while, I would say Funky Divas, but that never set right in my soul. It always felt like there was always a but there. Not because the record's not brilliant. I consider it one of the great girl group blockbusters of the 90s. You have 4 that you can't talk about with girl groups. You have to talk about Crazy Sexy Cool by TLC. You have to talk about Writings on the Wall with Destiny's Child, Funky Divas with In Vogue, and of course Spice by the Spice Girls. Those are the records that creatively, commercially, and critically shifted the girl group paradigm in the pop and R&B genre spaces. But there was something about that record that also felt a bit choreographed to a certain degree. That's not a knock. That's just my well-rounded perspective on it. But it was last year. I remember my friend Mark Chappelle, who's a colleague of mine and a dear friend. He writes for Albumism, and he's done a few pieces. And I think I said this in the previous conversation about In Vogue. And he did a piece on EV3 and whatever. And we were talking about it, and I said, oh shit, I think EV3 is my favorite In Vogue album. Like, I think that, like, I had to go into that top 200 and, like, take Funky Divas off and put the EV3 in its place. I just love that record. I think it's interesting. And then when you put it with Masterpiece Theater, like I said, it's a great 1-2 punch of sort of oddness. It reminds me, as I said earlier, of the Pointer Sisters' sort of 1-2 punch of energy and priority. They had a little bit of rock and R&B and soul on Energy, and then they just went pure like rock soul covers on Priority. Like nobody was doing that at the time, probably with the exception of like Donna Summer with The Wanderer and like Joan Armatrading. We're the only like black chicks doing those kind of records. And probably Betty Davis to a degree, but I'd say more so Donna Summer and Joan at that point. And Nona Hendrix. So long-winded answer, but sorry.
Well, we difference of opinion is always good. Let's see. Now, so we talked about your favorite In Vogue album, song. What about music videos? In Vogue was known for all the MTV VMA nominations. Still no Video Vanguard Award, but that's neither here nor there. What was your favorite In Vogue video?
Just a dead heat split between Free Your Mind and whatever.
I think, what's interesting looking at those videos now and just seeing how many videos are like, how many artists were influenced by those looks and those styles. You know what I mean? Like Rihanna and like all the people who kind of came after a video like Whatever wasn't really, I don't think, appreciated at the time?
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think those videos, I think Free Your Mind is Matthew Rolston. I think, he did both of those videos, but especially Free Your Mind, I think that of all the songs, that was really the one I think that has like really held up as a pop culture touchstone. It's in the movie I, Tonya, it's in Scandal. It's the song that just really moved things forward. I think where we could see more efforts, and I've tried to do this in my own way with the pieces that I've done, is to talk about them in a contemporary context. I would like, and this is a constructive critical point I'd make to In Vogue, where I think they need to be more, to embrace their legacy. Meaning, not saying that they don't, but they need to be willing to talk about their past work up till now. Talk about what you did on Born to Sing, Funky Divas, EV3, Masterpiece Theater, The Christmas Record, Soulflower, Up Through Electric Cafe. Talk about it. If you don't talk about it and set and get it going, and not in like a solipsistic way, but in a way that gives you your due, but also gets people curious about your body of work. And I think that can help spark those changes. But in the meantime, that's why you have this podcast. It helps people to discover the work, and you're doing good work with that here. And then, what I've tried to do with my few little pieces along the way to nudge people. Like, I think my retrospective on Masterpiece Theater might be the only one that's done like a deep dive on the album that's out there. I'm very proud of that. Because it's an interesting album. Is it perfect? No, but it's a good album, and it's engaging. So I think that's really what will help them, and that maybe they're talking about stuff will dovetail with what you guys are doing here with the Part of Us podcast.
Yes, the ladies need to talk more. They had their own podcast at one point. I'm not sure what happened to it, but
podcasts are hard to maintain, so.
Very true. So, like, what do you think? Like, how has In Vogue's music kind of influenced you personally or professionally? Like,
well, one, I think it was very formative in shaping my perspectives on what contemporary rhythm and blues can do, and sort of feeding into that rich tradition of just great girl groups and girl bands. It's engaging, it's progressive, it's interesting, it's complex but accessible, and that's I for me personally, even just taking my music critic author hat off, it excites my ear. So I still enjoy listening to them. I think they're fantastic. I throw those records on and have a good time. I love, like last year, I actually went ahead and I splurged to get the Japanese pressing of EV3 because I wanted those bonus tracks. I wanted those physically because I buy all my music physically. I enjoy streaming when I'm working out, when I'm traveling and at work, but when I'm at home, everything that I have a huge record collection. It's all physical. So I was like, well, I got the reissue of Born to Sing and I got all these other things. I'm like, let me go ahead and get the Japanese pressing of this. I need you that with Electric Cafe too, because there's some bonus tracks on there. Note to self. But professionally, it sort of dovetails with the personal. I write about music that moves me, and I think hopefully might move other people. And so when I talk about records and stuff, I have a friend of mine who's 7 years younger than me. He was born the year that Funky Divas came out. So he kind of missed, and he's a white guy, and he's more in the pop and country space. He's dabbled in some R&B. He loves Renaissance, so I take credit for that. I'm sort of introducing him to that. But we were able to meet on the pop and country stuff because I like those things too. But I told him when we were out shopping for records last year, I said, you should check out this record, Funky Divas. It's if you had to buy one In Vogue record. And see, that's, my objective perspective. If you had to buy one, Funky Divas is it. Because it really distills down their essence. And he really enjoyed it. So hopefully he'll make his way to some of the other records in the catalog.
Like, I never get tired. It's so interesting. Like, I've been listening to Funky Divas for like so many years now, literally since it came out, and I never get tired of it. But my last question is this. We've been talking about the girl groups of yesterday. We've been talking about In Vogue. We also mentioned, the Pointer Sisters, the Emotions, the Supremes. Like, are there any groups coming up today that you can say kind of remind you of In Vogue, or is there no one on the horizon that's kind of filled that gap yet?
This is a tricky question because for me, kind of after the Spice Girls, I felt like the girl group dynamic took a weird turn. It kind of got quiet again. I wasn't really into Danity Kane, even though I'm a Dawn Richard fan. I think her solo work is phenomenal. And then out of the British tradition, with no disrespect, like Girls Aloud, I respect what they've accomplished, but they're not to my speed. Wasn't a Sugar Babes fan either. I really do like Little Mix. I think they're very good. And Leanne Pinnock is going and doing her solo stuff. I'm hoping that eventually things will cool down and they can all get together and then Jesse Nelson might be able to come back and they can eventually maybe come back together as a 4-piece because they're a trio now. Or when they finished up their best of, they were as a trio because Jesse Nelson had left. But I really like Little Mix. King is a good one, but I think they're down to a duo now. It was two sisters and a friend. I have their We Are King album, and they've done some production work with Corinne Bailey Rae on I mentioned Black Rainbows and her The Heart Speaks and Whispers album. And I've seen them live. They're great. They play their instruments. Very, very talented. But it seems like they're moving more into the production spaces. So I don't really think, for me, In Vogue is kind of their own. Each group is their own. And I think each group finds its own way to sort of take what they need to from they reflect where we are in the culture. And so I don't want to, right now I think we're in it. You have like some of the K-pop groups like Blackpink and stuff, which are interesting in their own way. I don't think we'll ever see another In Vogue again, just in the same way that we'll never see a Emotions again or any of that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that there isn't like lineage that's traced. Like you can see bits and pieces of like the Pointer Sisters and the Emotions and those kind of groups in Vogue, but In Vogue also took it to a new place. They weren't going to be what those groups were because they had to be who In Vogue was at the time when they started and who they are now. And I think that's, but to put a finer point on it and give you a less long-winded response, Little Mix is probably my favorite, most what I would say in the last like 10 years, like the girl group that I really, really think has shown a lot of potential. And their catalog is really, really solid, like where they started with their first album, DNA. And then where they ended up with, I think it's Confetti was the last one. Thanks, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are you most looking forward to in the new journey with this podcast and its listeners?
Oh, just learning, hearing different views and perspectives and things of that nature, and being appreciative to be able to share mine. I love learning, so I'm excited about it. I can dig it.
Yeah, I think you have a great perspective, and it'll be great to add a nice another voice to the mix. Since this is a new season, we've got some. I feel like we're like The View or The Real. When new co-hosts come in and it's like we have to audition and see how great you are. But yeah, we're really excited to have you on. Lots of great convo, and I love that you have the perspective of bringing in other groups and other, being able to reference other artists, because I think that just really makes the conversation better.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so much, Quentin, for coming on with us. And thank you guys for listening and joining us on this episode of Part of Us. We'll be having guest co-hosts throughout the season as well. So, continue to listen and let us know who you love and who you want to hear more from. All right. Also, share your thoughts with us and engage with the podcast by emailing us at partofusev@gmail.com. We love to read your letters and get your feedback. And you can stream Part of Us on Apple, Audible, Amazon Music, Google, YouTube, and anywhere else you can listen to a podcast. All right. Until next time. Bye.
This episode of Part of Us at Vogue Fancast was researched, written, produced, and edited by Matthew at Culture Inject Productions. We're more than just a podcast. We're a fan community. You can keep up to date on Vogue and chat with other fans by visiting Vogue Craze on Facebook. You can also follow us on YouTube and Instagram at Vogue Craze and Twitter at Part of Us Fancast. Part of Us and Vogue Fancast is not endorsed by Vogue, E1 Music, or Vogue Records, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. Vogue and its names, images, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.